These are my top 5 tips for building epoxy tables. And depending on how nice you guys ask, I might just throw in additional tips along the way. And you guys do want to stick around till the end to see how this masterpiece came out. So we were commissioned to build this 6-seater epoxy table for a new client. We sourced this client through Instagram, where we sourced most of our clients from. I thought to myself, let me record the whole process of how we built this 6-seater epoxy table. I'm gonna go through this build step by step with you. I'm gonna show you the mistakes we made way back and how we fixed them, because all the research we've done in the past, no one showed us how to build epoxy tables successfully. So this is the chance you have. Watch the full video and I will promise you, you will definitely learn something new by the end of this video. This was a mistake we made way back when we started building our first ever epoxy table. The mistake we made was in the manufacturing process. While we were busy cutting our slab to fit into our mold, we manufactured the table exactly to the same size the client wanted. This resulted in, when we got to the stage where we had to cut our table down to its final size, we ended up cutting the table down slightly lengthwise and widthwise. So make sure you cut your table bigger lengthwise and widthwise once you're going to start with the manufacturing process. Tip number 2 is moisture content. And one of the most crucial parts and one of the most important parts out of your complete epoxy table build. Just like the first ever epoxy table we built, we didn't check the moisture content in the slab and we ended up replacing that table. So we invested in the Delmorst moisture meter. What I like about this machine is it's got these 2 little pins you hit right into the core of the slab. That's gonna give you the exact moisture readings inside your slab. We only made this mistake once and it cost us dearly. So I can't hammer enough on making sure that your wood is dry before you're going to use it. I am going to leave a link down in the description if you want to see the moisture meter that we are using. The next step in our project, and one additional tip I want to add that's not included in the 5 big tips I want to share with you guys, is building a mold. This is really simple. We are using white melamine sheets for multiple reasons. The melamine that's on the chipboard prevents the epoxy from penetrating into the wood. Once you build your mold, as per tip number 1 I shared with you, always make sure to build it slightly bigger lengthwise and widthwise. Once your mold is finished, you can seal it with silicone all the edges. Need to wait around about 1 to 2 hours for that to dry. Then the next step is to apply wax into your mold, or you can apply tuck tape. Unfortunately for us, we don't have tuck tape available in our country. That's why we are using ram wax. Tip number 3 is to make sure that you clean your wood before you're going to cast your epoxy. And we use an air hose for this step to make sure that the powerful air that's coming out cleans into all the small little cracks and voids into our slab. This is going to help once you're going to cast your epoxy, that you're not going to have any dust particles that's going to be in your epoxy. Guys, I've got a huge favor to ask you. We are literally on the verge of hitting 100,000 subscribers. This was my ultimate goal 4 years ago, and you can help me just by simply hitting that subscribe button, only if you think I deserve it. And this is something I want to leave with you guys, is in all the other channels you watch and support, make sure you help the guys out just by hitting the like and subscribing to their channels. It's literally helping our small YouTube community grow and helping us to produce more content. Just put it in this perspective. Imagine you go to your work every day and you provide a service and you need likes and subscription for you to thrive in your workspace. Obviously, you're going to ask people to like and subscribe. So let's hit 100,000 subscribers. Then the next goal is 1 million subscribers. I know it's still a far way, but it really helps our small community in growing, and it's helping us to produce more contents. And as you are busy doing that, make sure you leave a comment down below. What do you guys guys think of the tips. Was any of these tips helping you in going to build epoxy tables successfully? Thank you for all the support, guys. We are almost passing 1/4 of this video and I can't even remember on what tip we're standing on. So from here on forward, I'm just gonna share tips and you can take that information and make it your own. So before you're going to cast your epoxy, make sure to clamp your pieces of wood down, because if you're going to cast your epoxy without clamping it down, your wood is going to float around. And before you're going to cast your epoxy, make sure to clean the inside of your mold and the wood section one more time with your air hose. This is also something we recently invested in, not recently, around about a year ago, is we built our own vacuum chamber. This is helping us to remove all the air bubbles in our epoxy mixture. This is honestly a deal breaker for us. It is literally impossible for you to become a master in building epoxy tables just by watching a few YouTube videos. So, because all the people that's watching our videos always has a ton of questions asking us how stuff works, what sandpaper to use, how to polish, X, Y, and Z. That's why we made a 3-hour-long epoxy masterclass going into detail on how we manufacture all our tables. We literally built hundreds of these tables the past couple of years, and we're gonna teach you exactly everything you need to know in building epoxy tables successfully. This course is designed for all woodworkers, from your beginners to your experts or your DIYers or hobbyists. At the end of this video, I'm gonna leave a short preview of what you can expect in this masterclass. We have had a ton of good feedback on people that started companies, DIYers that started building epoxy tables successfully. So make sure to check out by the end of this video what you can expect. Did you see me poking the epoxy there with a wooden stick? This is the next tip I want to share with you guys. And one question we get asked many times from a lot of viewers watching our videos, and that is when to cast the next layer of epoxy, or what is the duration of time they need to wait before they're going to cast the next layer of epoxy. This is very crucial. Way back, many years ago, we would typically start with our first layer of epoxy. We would cast, we would wait for that layer to dry, then we will sand it slightly with 180 grit to make sure that the next layer of epoxy you're going to cast is actually going to bond with the first layer you just cast. But as time passed, we improved our methods and we improved our system of building epoxy tables. So this is how we are currently doing it. We will cast one layer of epoxy. We will consistently check it to make sure once it becomes tacky. What does tacky means? Tacky is like a toffee type of feel and look. Imagine you're going to stick a wooden stick into a very warm toffee. And this is where we will typically start with our second layer of epoxy, because the bond you're going to get between those layers are going to be the strongest bond you will ever get. And another tip I want to share with you guys is we recently, within the last 12 to 16 months, we switched over from epoxy that's curing in 4 to 6 hours to using deep casting epoxy. But we are not casting our epoxy to the full depth of our table, because we found that doing that, we still struggle with a little bit of air bubbles. So what we will typically do is, on a normal table, we will separate it into 3 casting layers. This means that once we're going to cast into 3 layers, it gives the air bubbles enough time to rise up, and it gives us sufficient time to come the next day to pop the air bubbles. Now remember, if you're going to use deep casting epoxy, the chemical reaction is going to take place a little bit quicker, but because you're going to cast thinner layers, the reaction is going to take a little bit more time to get set, and this is going to help you to reduce air bubbles. So what you see me doing here is busy fixing one of the mistakes. I am also human. we also make mistakes. Luckily for us, we've learned through all our mistakes and we know exactly the solution we need to take in fixing these mistakes. Because we are sitting in the summer months in the country I'm from, our workshop is averaging on 27 to 28 degrees inside our workshop. This means that once we're going to cast our epoxy a little bit thicker than what we should, the chemical reaction is going to take place a little bit quicker. So once we got back the next day on the second layer we casted, the reaction took place a little bit quicker. And this meant that we need to go back to the old roots of building epoxy tables. We were left with a little bit of air bubbles between the epoxy and wood, and the reaction took place. We didn't have that good tacky consistency that we were looking for when we're going to cast our last layer of epoxy. This meant that we need to use a small little drill, and we need to drill that small little air bubbles between the epoxy and the wood out. Then I'm going to come and sand the epoxy section only with a 180 grit, because the next layer of epoxy I'm going to cast, I want to make sure that those two epoxy layers are going to bond to each other. Once I'm done with the sanding, I'm going to come with the air hose and a damp cloth to make sure that I remove all the dust particles from our table. Then we're going to continue with the next layer we need to cast in our table. Before we had a vacuum chamber. And another tip I want to leave with you guys is we left our part A epoxy in the sun for around about 2 to 3 to 4 hours, just depends on how hot it is outside. This gives the epoxy enough time to become more in a liquid type of water form, and this is going to help you to reduce air bubbles. Cast thinner layers, make sure you consistently pop the air bubbles with your gas torch, and then you continue with the casting. But it's also very important that you need to follow the supplier where you purchase your epoxy from. You need to follow that specifications. I don't want to take any responsibility if your product is going to fail. So we will typically, once we are done with our last casting of the epoxy, we will leave our table for 7 days. This is going to allow the table to set fully and give the epoxy enough time to become as hard as a rock. Then we're going to move to the next step. There's something on my heart and something I want to clear in the air, and that is that we will typically have 98 to 99% of all the videos we post on our channel will have positive feedback and we have many likes, but there'll always be that 1 or 2 guys that will always leave bad comments and dislike videos. So I want to ask you as my audience, there's sometimes videos we will post where we won't do any explanation, where we will typically only play music, and then there's typical this videos where we will go into detail and explain everything we do in the video. It's difficult to get a balance because some people complain I'm talking too much, some people complain I'm not talking at all. So where's a good balance? Let me know in the comment section down below. What do you guys think I need to do to keep every single person happy that's watching my content? And the last thing I want to clear up in the air is that for you that's following me right from the start, you would notice that I started off my YouTube journey and my custom furniture brand in my garage around about 4 years ago. Although I'm building custom furniture since I left school in 2006, I'll still have haters saying that this is not a DIY channel. You've got workers working for you, blah, 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 blah. Now, if you know my history, I actually had a construction company before I started the YouTube channel and before I started my company manufacturing custom furniture. I started off in my garage with only me, a handful of tools, and I started recording videos and I started posting it on YouTube. Then the company started picking up. We started getting more orders, we started creating more content, and out of the DIY YouTube channel I started, I actually started a company called Craft House Custom Furniture. We specialize in high-end custom furniture. We've moved shop literally last 4 years like 5 or 6 times, every time to a bigger workshop because there's growth in the company. And we employ 2 workers. that's helping me because it's literally impossible for me to get to all the work and to keep all the clients happy. My ultimate dream is to have a huge workshop where I employ like 10 to 12 to 15 people, helping everyone out and doing what I love. This is my hobby. This is what I love. I love creating. And then you'll have guys in the comment section saying that this is absolutely not a DIY channel. Look at all your expensive tools, bloody, bloody, bloody. They'll go on and go on. And this is negative comments I don't even react to because they don't know who I am. They don't know where I come from. They don't know my history. I mean, at the end of the day, this is such a positive story that came out of COVID, is that I'm trying to make a success of my life. I'm trying to feed my family. I'm trying to help you guys out there producing more content. And let me know what you guys think of this, because I don't know what I need to do with this. Anyway, enough sulking from my side. Back to the video. As you saw me wearing my fancy new work shirt with a little bit of flamingos and I think it's watermelons. That's not actually my work suit. I actually went to go and play golf that day. I actually had a real good golf game. I think I ended up playing 86. Do we have any golfers watching the content? Leave me a comment down below. So that's the perks of having your own company and having a few workers working for you. Once it gets quiet in the shop, you can actually break away to have a life, because once it's quiet, you can do stuff like this. You can go fishing for the morning, you can go and play golf. But when it's crunch time and there's a lot of orders coming in, we are putting in the hours, and this is something people don't really see. We're working late nights, we're working Saturdays, we're working Sundays continuously for weeks and weeks after each other. And this, like I said, is the perks of having your own company, is that you got some free time once the shop is a little bit quiet. Back to the video. A question we get a lot is, how do you fasten your steel base to the underside of your table? Simple. Threaded inserts. That's a really modern way of fastening any base to the underside of your table. Don't use hex screws and normal wooden screws. It's just not professional. Stay away as far as possible from that. Moving to the next step is we are going to apply a very thin layer of epoxy to the top side and to the bottom side of our epoxy table. Because we're doing this step is we want to close all the small little imperfections, all the little cracks in our table, and we're going to achieve this by applying a layer of epoxy to the top and to the bottom of our table. Because we're doing this to the full surface, if you're only going to close the cracks and the holes, the overflowing epoxy on that crack and hole is going to leave a stain on your wood. And we realized this way back at the start when we started building epoxy tables. And once you're going to oil your table, you see like this little stain mark that's just a pain in the butt. And this is actually something we pick up from Blacktail Studios, is that you will apply a very thin layer of epoxy over the complete surface. Once we've done that step, then we will come and close all the cracks and holes, because you'll see once you're going to apply the layer of epoxy, the wood is going to soak up the epoxy. Then you can come afterwards and continuously just filling those holes and cracks with epoxy, because you don't want to go and deliver the table that's not perfect. This is quite a crucial part in the build, is in having the absolute perfect finish in your table. Once we apply that thin layer of epoxy over the table and it's dry, we sanded it down, you will always have this micro cracks and micro holes you need to close. And this is where we are using a quick set epoxy. It just needs UV light to become hard. In like 10 to 20 seconds, it's solidly hard. This is saving us a lot of time on all our projects. Guys, I forgot to mention that the epoxy masterclass we got obviously is at a small fee. The fees are going up double the price in middle June, so make sure to go and check that out before you're going to miss the special. I'm going to leave a link down in the description where you can find the website where you can find the course that's going to help you to become a master in building epoxy tables. So once we closed all the small little imperfections on our table, it's time to move to the finishing stages of our project. And we're using the small palm router from Festool because it's got a nice flat surface underneath that keeps the router straight at all times. And as per all our tables, we like to keep the thickness of the table. Thus why we're only giving it a small 45-degree chamfer with a 45-degree router bit. We typically do this on all our tables, and we will router the table on both sides because we don't want that small little sharp edge on all our tables. I would like to pick your brain a little bit because we are posting hundreds of epoxy table builds. I'm thinking a little bit more out the box, and this is where I'm gonna need your help in creating future content. What do you guys want me to build? I'm thinking like a wood and epoxy small little desk fish tank. I think that will be a very creative way in using wood and epoxy. I've got some creative ideas. You obviously think I'm crazy, but let me know in the comment section down below. Blacktail Studio done a cool denim and epoxy build that was really creative, but what do you guys think I should build next? Let me know in the comment section down below. Maybe I just pick your project and I will build it, and maybe we give it away for free. Now we are reaching the end of our project. This is the sanding stages of our project, and because we want to create a frost smoky finish, we're only going to sand our table down to 320 grit sandpaper, making sure we clean between all the layers we sand, because you see that small little dust particles sometimes make swirl marks. You have to clean those with a cloth. You have to clean the underside of your sanding machine. This is going to help you to reduce all the swirl marks on your table. And we're using the finishing sander from Festool. It's going to give you the perfect finish. So typically on all our epoxy projects, we like using Odie's oil for multiple reasons. Odie's oil, you can sand your wooden projects to any grit your heart desires. Well, that's what Odie's claim. We will typically sand our wood and epoxy sections on our table to 220 grit. Then we will come and sand only the epoxy section to 320 grit or 400 grit if we want to achieve a frost smoky finish. Otherwise, we will sand our epoxy and wood section to 200 grit, and if the client requires a high gloss finish, we will typically sand only the epoxy section to 1500 or 3000 grit sandpaper. Then we will start with the polishing process. So this is gonna be the end of the video. Thank you guys for sticking around until the end. Let me know what do you guys think of this build. Let me know in the comment section down below if there's something you would do differently. Also let me know if you learned something new today, and if you're a new subscriber here, let me know in the comment section down below. I would love to interact with you. Welcome to the DIY with Greg Club. I really appreciate all the support. Before you guys head out, make sure to support us by liking the video, comment down below what you think of this build, and make sure you subscribe. Thank you guys. I'll see you next week with another super cool build. Cheers. We've been building epoxy tables for many years now, and we are finally going to share all our methods and techniques with you. My name is Greg, and I am going to show you how to build the perfect epoxy table. I'm going to take you through the step-by-step methods we take in building epoxy tables on a daily basis. I'm going to show you all the tools you need, exactly how to use them, and throw in some tips and tricks down the line. This masterclass has been designed for all woodworkers, from your beginner all the way up to your experts. Everyone thinks you need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has set. That's not true. You need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has become tacky. Click on this video or in the description down below for more information.